Yes, sir.
Looks live.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Bijan. My pronouns are he, him. I'm adjunct faculty at PNCA. I teach third year Design Studio 2. And I co-host the lecture series along with PNCA and also the studio that I help run called Fisk, and also Kendall of Please Respect Your Neighbors. So historically, we've been running this lecture series as a lecture series because lectures were a thing last year in person. And with COVID, more dialogue seemed like a better idea than having someone talking to a screen. So the purpose of this is to create dialogue between students and professionals and faculty at the program, as well as you and the public. So I'm just going to briefly explain the structure of how this panel will go, and then we'll open it up to some intros with the panelists, and then we'll have our own dialogue for about 30 minutes. And then after that, we'll open it up to the larger public for questions, and we encourage you to ask questions via video. You can also submit questions via text if you'd like. But today we have Christine Shen and Angie Bach joining us from Portland. I'm not going to give a technical introduction to them, but I'm going to let the two students on the panel do that. I'm just going to give kind of a casual introduction to them. So I attended the same school as Christine and Angie, Cal Arts in California. And I've known them since you were probably like 17 or 18, right? It's kind of weird to think about, but yeah, so I've known them both for about 10 years. Or no, 7 years. No, 10 years. 10 years. Yeah, 2010. That's when we started at Cal Arts. And I've been following them and their work since they were in school, but also post-grad. And they're two of my favorite people and designers. And I think they both represent completely different paths as a designer that you can take. Christine worked with me at Fisk for about 1.5 years and was very instrumental in the starting of our studio. And is one of the best cooks and best designers I know. And she's been in Portland for the last number of years. Angie, on the other hand, has spent a lot of her time in Europe, working in Amsterdam. So I'm really excited to kind of see the dialogue that happens between all of us and bringing them two together. They've known each other for quite some time and having a design conversation. So next I'm going to pass it off to, and I also want to say thank you to Chelsea and Kristen and PNCA program and Weston for hosting the Zoom and making this all functional and nice and not scary. But I'm going to pass it off to Kendall now.
Hi, I'm Kendall, he, him. I'm based in New York, went to school at SCAD in Atlanta, and I've met Christine more recently this year, but I've known about her work through what she's done with the at Fisk. And Angie, actually, we've known each other for like 4 or 5 years now. She was an intern at Nike after I was, so yeah.
Cool. And Kendall was also our first panelist of the series, and a good friend of mine. Next, I'll pass it off to Owen, who is one of my students. And Owen is going to give an intro and then also read Christine and Angie's technical introduction that will give you more information about them.
Hi, my name's Owen. My pronouns are he, him. Yeah, so as Bijan said, I'm a transfer student from Washington. And first I'll introduce Christine. Christine Shen is a Portland-based freelance designer. Shen has collaborated with clients such as Nike, Apple, Fisk Projects, Wieden & Kennedy, and Adidas, to name a few. As working for multiple distinct brands goes, the styles and visual elements used in Shen's work are a diverse display of versatility and adaptability based upon each client's aesthetic. There are occasionally a mixture of digital and print components in Christine's designs, collaging paper with computer-generated graphics. With this being said, some of the things that stay consistent throughout her designs are an excellent use of color, shape, type, and composition. And next we'll introduce Angie. Angie Back is a graphic designer based out of Portland. Originally brought up in Ohio and then California, Angie is a graduate of the California Institute of Arts and has had the opportunity to work across various cities to expand her design practice. She began her career in New York City and then made her way to Amsterdam to work on the innovation team for Adidas Global Brand Design, and has worked on multiple 360 campaigns from conception and direction to execution. In 2020, she moved back to the States and is currently working with Wyden and Kennedy on different commercial and non-commercial accounts.
Thank you, Owen. Emery, do you want to intro yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Emery. I use she, her pronouns, and super excited to meet both of you. Like I said, this is my first year in design school. And so I was hoping that we could maybe just start off by both of you sharing a little bit about your experience together at CalArts and how your design work benefited from your relationship in school.
Well, thank you for the introductions. I'm Angie. I go by, my pronouns are she, her. And I guess, let me just reframe the question again. So it was asking about our relationship and how that's affected us in our like career.
Yeah, just your experience like in as a design student, and maybe like how it's affected the way that you guys work together now, or your trajectory professionally or personally.
I mean, I'm Christine. My pronouns are she and her. I feel like from the beginning, like we sort of saw each other like as competition, actually. Yeah, that's right. And we like sort of like weren't really actually friends like from the beginning. We were in the same class as well. So I think after like getting to know each other more, that competition sort of turned into like something where we would just a friendship.
Yeah, just like inspiring each other and
yeah,
like working on stuff together. And like I think the PNCA group, like CalArts, like the students, there aren't that many people in a class, so in a lot of ways like you have to kind of become tight knit. But we were lucky enough that I think even outside of design we would have been friends. And just like I think both of us like to integrate sort of like experiences and things that we've done into our like personal works and stuff. And so just like the fun times that we'd have on like a Thursday night at the gallery, or like, you know, just things we'd experience at like the Halloween parties and stuff. Like, I think all of those things actually help bring sort of like, yeah, I don't know, like it helped us with our design and stuff too, because we just like knew each other as people, and then, you know, just wanting to, yeah, like inspire and help one another throughout the 4 years.
Yeah. And we like, I mean, like Angie said, like we were part of like a really tight knit group, but we were also roommates. And we also sat like literally next to each other in like the studio space at CalArts too. And when we weren't sitting next to each other, we were like 3 desks apart, like literally for 4 years straight. And like,
actually it was weird when we graduated. I was like, damn, something's missing.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Christine, where is she?
Yeah, we haven't been together since school, actually. Like, when you moved here, it was like the first time we sort of like lived in the same city, and not that we work together now, but we're just like closer again, and it's a shame. Go ahead, Beej.
I was gonna say, like, what I guess Angie, you're kind of touching on like saying like that kind of like a personal relationship played a larger part in like your growth as a student, maybe, or like that it kind of like inspired. Like, I don't know, like I think for me personally, I had like a sense of friendly competition in school, and I think that was something that was like important to my development at that point. And I think it's like totally healthy to have that kind? Do you think that there was that between you two or your larger class? And I think sometimes it feels like when you have a personal relationship with your classmates, that encourages that sense of friendly competition versus like not being friends with your classmates.
Yeah, I feel like we all definitely pushed each other, but I think specifically me and Angie pushed like each other more.
Right, and I think that was because we were so close, you know, we were able to be like super open, really like, you know, intimate or vulnerable with one another in ways that maybe, yeah, like with our other classmates, that sort of stuff isn't as natural. But definitely, yeah, I've grown so much because of like, yeah, having spent 4 years next to teen. And even now, like, again, like we haven't been together all the time, but whenever we do chat or catch up, of course, like we'll talk about life stuff, but when we do talk about design stuff, we're always giving each other advice or different perspectives and the things that we've experienced and stuff from after school. And it's so nice to just have somebody that that you can, you know, go to with questions or like, yeah, like other perspectives and always just be like supernatural and casual.
Yeah.
Totally. I think it's really important to have like your network and your like close group of friends that you can help navigate like throughout big decisions. And I guess I mean that kind of like makes me think like I think the thing that's so cool about design is that you can really work anywhere. Like I moved to Portland from LA. That's not that big of a move, but like Angie, you moved to Europe to work in design, and it's something I always fantasize about. Like, what if I moved to Tokyo to work as a graphic designer? And I think like you're living that life. And you moved to New York after you graduated, and then you moved to Europe. But I think like what part of your career has like moving and that kind of like it's a really big thing to move your whole life somewhere else, and especially like I'm sure New York was like a big change, and then Amsterdam. Like, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think it's such a unique like path to have.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I think that like after graduating, I kind of always knew that I wanted design to take me to where I wanted to go in a personal way too. Like, when I was my last year of college, I went to Korea, which was like a really life-changing experience for me. Um, and I just knew I wanted to be in a metropolis. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to New York. I really love it there. Like the vibe is cool. Like that's where I want to be. So knowing that, then I kind of allowed my design plans to like, I sort of channeled that through my design like goals, you know. So I was looking at studios in New York and trying to figure out, you know, how to get there. And that was my priority. Was like, I want to be in New York. And then I got, I mean, the Amsterdam job was more unexpected. It was like more of a surprise. I wasn't really thinking about um, going specifically to Amsterdam, but I knew that I wanted to go somewhere international at some point. And again, maybe I had thought originally it would be like Korea or Asia, but you know, I'm not going to be like, no, thank you to like a cool opportunity, you know.
Yeah.
So I
I feel
think
like I remember that moment.
yeah,
You were
we were
like,
out in New
I
York.
think I'm gonna take this job.
Yeah. Everyone's like, wait, you just got to New
I was
York.
like, what?
How long were you in New York before you went to Europe?
Almost 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know, time in New York is like something else, so felt like nothing. Um, but yeah, I think that having made the jump to go to New York after graduating gave me the confidence and the courage to take on the Amsterdam job because I had never been to Europe prior to that. So when I took the job and I got off the flight was like my first time in the city and in that continent. And so it's always just like a leap of faith in some ways, but also you just have to kind of be open to those experiences and like if you want that to happen, like it, like to manifest it, you know, and like talk about it and stuff because, you know, people won't know that you want these things unless you say something. Granted, like my experience wasn't quite that, but I knew that I did want to be somewhere like international. Um, but yeah, it's been pretty. Yeah, I can't believe that I'm talking about all this and being in Portland now. definitely moving and adjusting can be tricky, especially like right now. We were just talking on the call about how, you know, I came to Portland right as COVID was hitting. And obviously, like with, you know, Zoom and digital life, acclimating becomes even harder. So just like trying to figure out always like new ways to like connect with people and like, yeah, again, like trying to be open to new experiences all the time.
Yeah, I was like so excited for you to move to Portland and then so sad. Like such crazy timing.
I wonder, moving like from place to place and then kind of, I mean, not that you isolated yourself by going to Amsterdam, because obviously it's a new opportunity, new network to be gained, but going off of what you were saying about the relationship you were building with not just Christine, but obviously all of the rest of your friends and network, what did it feel like to almost lose that instantly, or like were you able to still maintain some sort of connection with them or influence in terms of your work, career path, decision making, so on and so forth?
Yeah, that's a great point. I definitely felt really isolated when I first got to Europe. Yeah, like not just because I'm losing, you know, the people that I actually know, but culturally too, you know, just like adapting to the language and like the way, you know, people are and stuff. I actually feel like I was pretty, I had to lean on my network actually when I first moved, you know, and just reach out even more because I felt like new and, you know, kind of alone and stuff, um, especially with work. But I have to say, like, I was lucky enough to work in a studio where the people around were were also kind of new. Like, the studio in itself, like, everybody was just kind of starting. And so I
You
think.
want to talk a little bit about what the setup of the studio and like specifically, I guess, what you were doing at Adidas?
Oh yeah, good show. So I was in brand design with it in Amsterdam, and our studio was separate from like HQ. Normally, you know, you have all the departments sort of on one campus, but brand design Amsterdam had its own studio, so we kind of functioned like a normal design studio might, you know, because we were literally in a separate space, and it was only like 15 of us full time and stuff. So it kind of emulated a lot of this like CalArts like tight knit kind of group as well, where you got so comfortable with the people you're working with that I think I started feeling like I didn't have to lean so much on my network in the States or like my friends back home, because I was able to lean on these new people who I was experiencing all of this together with.
Feel like in school, like we learn about Dutch design and that's such a like, it's such a thing, like Dutch graphic design, you know, like, and I think you build this idea of these studios and these people and this work. Like, did your perspective change? Did you like meet any of those people? Did you like do any amazing studio visits, or kind of like how did it shift your perspective on what that work meant to you?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the studios I really love is Studio Dunbar, who's in Rotterdam. Um, and their work is so amazing to me because you see it all over the city. Like they've designed the whole municipality like system. They've done the politie identity, which is like the police. Like all the design that they've done is integrated into the city. And in general, what I noticed in the Netherlands is just how like intrinsic design is to the actual like country and like the way that everything is set up, even like these street signs and like, you know, all of these things where you realize like, oh, design really influences everything here. Um, and so that was something that I thought was so amazing and was really inspired by whenever I'd even just be like walking. Like the Stedelijk Museum is amazing and all of these places, you know. Um, and I did actually get to meet some really cool people from places that I admire. And it's, I don't know, yeah, you're like floored by it because you're just like, wow, I'm such a fan of like your work and I see it everywhere. And you meet these people and they're so humble and just so intelligent and cool. So that was
Yeah,
definitely like, yeah, really amazing experience.
having access to those people is pretty cool,
Yeah.
and a lot of that, obviously, like there's so much dialogue via internet, but it's still like so important like to have those, to make those relationships and be around that kind of culture, because like I think the kind of city you live in really impacts you as a designer, and I think it's cool to be around and see like where those people were making that kind of work, you know.
For sure.
Christine, do you want to talk a little bit about your path after school? Like you guys kind of split up like literally after like 4 years of being together, and I'm curious like how your path is like different or similar to Angie's.
Yeah. So I just ended up right in Portland right after school, and actually got my job at Nike through Beige. He like recommended me to work on the brand design team there, and I was like, this is a crazy job to do right after school. Like, of course I'm gonna move to Portland for this. I didn't really have any plans. Like, I didn't know if I wanted to move to New York or go abroad or anything, and I just sort of like ended up here. But yeah, I feel like us being on like opposite ends of like the country and us doing like very different things, because she was like working in a studio and I was like working in like a corporate environment. Like, I was like super envious that she was like working at this like smaller studio. Yeah, I mean, like starting off in like the corporate world is just, I don't know, it influenced my career like a lot. Like, I feel like I learned like a lot of things while I was there, like not necessarily like design wise, but like how to like be a better like professional, and like how to put together a presentation, and things that you don't really learn in school. Like, I learned there, and sort of like use that knowledge in like the work that I do now. Like, I feel like if I hadn't started at Nike, I definitely would not have ended up in the spot where I'm now, like as a freelance designer. But yeah, I remember when Angie moved to Amsterdam, like, and her like working at a place like Adidas that is like pretty similar to Nike, where it's just like corporate and it's about sport. Like, I remember her being like, what was your experience like, and like, am I making the right decision and stuff. And it was really nice being able to like guide her through that and like give her some advice like before she started, just to like let her know like, this is sort of like how it works here. Like, I don't know if it's the same there, but
411.
yeah.
Yeah. FYI.
Yeah.
It's funny that dynamic between like Angie working at the studio right out of school and you working right at Nike kind of flipped on its head, and you went freelance and she went to Adidas.
Yeah, seriously. I think about that. And I'm like, damn.
That's all a dream.
I know. The next step for me to go into like advertising is and I'm like, I'm out. I'm gonna start my own thing. Yeah.
Speaking of advertising, Angie, so right before COVID, I was actually at Wyden too, and I left to come back to New York when it all went down. You coming from like the Dutch world and being inundated with like design everywhere, and kind of like just the culture understanding what design is like, and then taking that and coming over here and working in like American advertising. What is that like? What is that like?
That's a great question. And honestly, it actually comes down to culture. Like, the Dutch are really good about balancing like work and personal life. Actually, when she was visiting once, we went to go to a store, and I remember I left work early because I was like, oh, this place is gonna close at 6. And we got there and they were closed at like 5:30. And like the people were still there, and we were outside like, can we like look at the stuff? And they're like, no, we're closed. And it was just like one of those, it's just how they are out there. And I really, I think that that's something that I am trying to actually bridge now that I'm back here in the States, where there's just, it feels like a bit more demanding in some ways, because there's just like a higher expectancy of like really great work all the time. And so I'm actually trying to like be more Dutch about it in that sense, where I'm like, like I'm closing my laptop, I can't do this anymore. Like I need, you know, some sort of balance. And especially in advertising where yeah, things are always just like, you know, bustling and just something needs to be done all the time, you know? So in terms of like looking at it from a design lens, not as much, but more from like a work-life balance lens, like culturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're always been really good about that all the time. You have a pretty good like work-life balance, like regimen, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like it took me a while to like figure it out. So.
Did Bijan work you really hard when you started?
I think we're pretty good, right? I mean, like, I think, right?
Yeah, I kind of like mastered it sort of while I was at Fisk. I feel like towards the end of my time at Nike, like I just felt really uninspired creatively and was just like really feeling like I needed to be in a different environment where I would like want to work. And then like once I started working at Fisk and Beach was like, oh, we're gonna do an album cover, oh, we're gonna do this Nike campaign, and like all these things just sort of like started coming at me. Like I just started to like work more actually like during the day. So I didn't really have to like work later. But then like once I started working on my own, I still sort of like had to like go through a learning curve because there like isn't somebody there to be like, Christine, like I need this thing from you. And I still sort of struggle with it today too.
I think it's really hard. I think like it's like interesting that you pointed out as like a European culture versus American culture, but like people here like don't really see any boundaries between like 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. or like 12 p.m. and 10 p.m. Like I think people just expect you to always be on your phone and be available, which can be frustrating at times. And I think it's really up to like us as individual designers to set those boundaries. Otherwise, people will take advantage of you and of those boundaries. And I think it's something I constantly struggle with. But I really think it's like a self kind of something you determine for yourself. And I think something that takes practice and something that like you have to feel confident about. Otherwise, you just are like, if someone's messaging me to send this new round of work, that you feel obligated to do it. And that's not really the truth. It's just something that someone made up to pressure you into doing that.
For sure. It takes a lot of discipline to just like, yeah, not answer or like look away. Be like, wait till the morning.
It's
Do you
hard,
feel
for sure.
like because of COVID and since you're all working from home, do you feel like those pressures are exacerbated because of that, or like it kind of helps alleviate it and kind of you have that sort of distance because everyone knows that everyone's kind of somewhat a little bit more on their own time?
I feel like my answer is going to be different than yours, but
Yeah,
it
depends on the client. It just depends on what kind of person they are. But I regardless of like the asks from people, like I draw a line. Like I'm done working at 6. I'm not gonna read my email on the weekend, especially just being at home all the time. Like even though I was working from home before, like now that going out on the weekend like isn't really as normal of a thing. Like it's really easy to just be like, oh, let me see if anyone emailed me this weekend. But I am like super strict with just like hard stop because I know people can like take advantage of knowing that like you're at home all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like I think that kind of makes me think of like a lot of people like you, Christine, you were already working from home prior to COVID, right? Like you already kind of like, I know you've taken the time to kind of make like a really great setup for yourself because it's like, you know how important it is to have a kind of just the right workspace. And I guess like you already probably had to work on those boundaries a bit, right? Like prior. And then with COVID now, like so many people are working from home. that like that idea of a commute is kind of gone, and that idea of like going to work is gone. And I'm sure Angie, like in a lot of ways, you're missing out on like those human, moving to a new city, working at a new agency. Like there's a lot of, sorry to bring that up, but there's like a lot of things that you're missing, you know?
Definitely.
And I don't know what my question is exactly, but I guess, yeah, like I don't really have a question. I was just, yeah, pointing that out, I guess.
No, for sure. I think again, yeah, like for me, I do have a completely different sort of like situation just yeah because I'm starting like a new job, especially during COVID, which are like two things that you don't want happening at the same time. But granted, with that said, like I think for me, like working from home now, it's such a mental thing. You know, because like even for example, like your bedroom, you don't, at least for me, like my bed is like a sacred space. Like I don't want to like bring my laptop into it. I don't want to like do things, you know, normally that I would, because that's where I rest. And like now where like when I, you know, work at my desk, um, if I don't like, if I'm finished at like 6 or maybe even later, it's hard to like be just doing things on the internet or at my computer or doing other things that I spend my whole day working like at the same space in, you know? So
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes even things like switching out my chair helps me mentally with that stuff.
Yeah.
I was telling Christine, like, I have my normal working chair, but then sometimes I'll pull out this like foldable, you know, chair that you bring out to like, like, out,
Like a cookout or
yeah,
something.
like a cookout or something, because I'm relaxing, even if I'm like doing stuff at my desk still, just to kind of give some sort of mental shift in doing something different that isn't work, but you know, again, like being in the same space to do it.
Yeah. I think that's really what my question was, is like about the idea of space and how we're all like reevaluating that. And I think especially for like the students, like you're going like Emery and Owen, you're both starting school from this kind of like pretense of the situation, and you're working from home. And I guess like Angie, I think even like switching out your chair to a lawn chair is like kind of a fun tip. But I guess like, I don't know, is there any other advice you would have for like students who, you know, they're doing their design education from home now, and you know, you don't have all the same facilities and lights and things like that?
It is so tricky because for sure, like there's things at school, you know, like equipment and stuff that you need that are more accessible, obviously. And again, like just having the peer to peer, like, you know, casual, like, hey, what do you think about this? Like that stuff is so valuable, you know, and it definitely is. I'm trying to like think about how to bridge that into like a digital space. Yeah, I think for me, again, it's more just like small things like the chair tip and the just like being able to like get outside once in a while, even if it's not to do anything. Like I do find that sometimes if I'm like really like spinning my wheels on something like for work, I forget that like going outside can change your whole perspective, even if it's just to go to the co-op to get milk.
Yeah.
Just like getting some space, and again, just like allowing your mental space to like breathe a little bit.
That kind of brings, I wonder, like from Owen and Emery, like how has that been so far? Like, do you find it's easy to stay focused? Do you get distracted a lot? Is it, do you feel like you're overworked or you're overwhelmed and you need these boundaries? Like, what has it been like? Because I couldn't imagine being a student right now. I can't, like, not at all, especially obviously going through it before, but I just wonder like what you guys are going through.
It's kind of funny because it's kind of both the perfect time to be going to school and the worst time to be going to school. I feel like I've talked to a lot of people that are kind of envious of my position because I'm not trying to fight for a job at this point, because like they were pretty limited for a little while. But it's also, it is really tricky. And especially once the smoke rolled in, like you couldn't go outside. So we were just like drowning in just staring at a screen forever. And I feel like I agree with what you said, Angie, about just like having a space. I also don't work in my bed at all because as soon as I close my laptop, I like just can't handle it. Trying to, you know, reconcile those two worlds. But but also like being comfortable in your working space. Like I've never like had the time to set up like a really nice home studio basically. So I feel like being comfortable in the workspace as well as like differentiating it from your relaxing space, I think that's really the only way to do it, because it does feel like it's overwhelming. It's a lot. Yeah, we're working a lot, but.
And I feel like for me, like having worked from home for like so many years now, like the workspace that I've created is like for work only. Like I feel like when I first started out, I would see like people eating lunch at their desks and stuff like that. I thought that was normal. And working from home, like sometimes I feel the urge to like come to my desk and eat. And like even if it's like even if I'm not even working and I'm like I'm gonna watch a YouTube video, like I'll just stop myself and like bring my iPad to my dining room table and like just watch the video on my dining room table, just so I have like a break from this room, or like for you guys, like whatever space that you have set up.
Yeah, I definitely
Yeah,
feel
I
like working.
think, oh,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, yeah, I was, yeah, just like responding to Kendall's question. I think I definitely agree with like what Emery and Angie said, separating your space. Because I've noticed I have this thing where like if I sit down to do something, I can just completely neglect breaks and work on something for like 8 or 9 hours, which is not good. Like it led to, it's led to like burnouts and everything. So just like, yeah, like going out into the kitchen area of our dorm and working that way. And also I think like working in a space where other people are, as opposed to just my room, kind of keeps me like on track and focused, because like in your room you kind of lose focus. So I think that was a really important thing for me to remember. And then as with like class and stuff, I think I feel kind of lucky to be a design student where things are like more naturally digital as opposed to like a drawing or painting or like sculpture major. I feel like that would be super tricky. But in general, like the breakout rooms that we've been doing in Zoom for critiques have been really useful.
I guess it's sort of like you guys are getting trained for like client meetings and like
Yeah, that's
you know,
cool.
like presenting your work to other people in like different scenarios.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, overall, I feel like working from home like requires a lot of discipline, and I think that's like something I experienced when I was working from home for like 3 years. Is I just felt like when I was working from my couch or my bed, I would like get more sad about my work, my state of where I was, like that I think in like relationship, like talking to your parents, like I just felt like a failure working from my couch. Like, and I think like, I don't know, it just felt like wrong. It just feels wrong sometimes. And I think like creating that discipline for yourself within your home is something that I worked hard to set up a studio in my basement at that point. And like, granted, I didn't always work there, but I think like there is a sense of discipline that comes from working from home. Like Christine, you were talking about like not eating at your desk and eating at like a dining table and like taking that time and being conscious of that. And I think now we're all kind of challenged with that discipline or like juggling that. And I think it's like really interesting because like the idea of work from home was already kind of like a prevalent thing. And now we're really just seeing it like full, like everyone's doing it. And yeah, I'm sure I've seen a lot of interior designers talk about how to like set up your perfect workspace and stuff, but
Yeah.
It's interesting how the things that felt like luxurious before COVID now feel like constricting. And I'm wondering, I was thinking about you working with a team that, is based in Amsterdam, but I'm sure you're connecting with people all over, and probably even the folks in Amsterdam are from all over. And so like space has already kind of flattened out and like changed for you in your work, and then to think from working from home, you don't have to wear pants. I mean, it's like, what are you gonna do? but like really, you know, setting those rules for yourself, it's like, it does feel like you're kind of like more present, I think, sometimes, if you like bring it a little bit for even a Zoom conversation. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Oh, please go on.
I was going to say, I'm really curious if, you know, both of you have worked in very different ways, but with really international brands and projects. And I wonder how that prepared you for this time, or didn't, you know? Does it feel, I mean, no one was ready for this, you know? But yeah, I'm just curious how that's affected how you process things now.
I think I can go for first on this one. At least for me, like you were saying, Kristen, like I have, having worked in like a, and I don't know if it's necessarily that it was an Amsterdam based place, but just like a corporate setting, I definitely felt like I have already gotten pretty used to having to like be very clear about things, for example, like in emails, or like, you know, talking with collaborators or studios or agencies, not just in person, you know, because yeah, you'll have some studios are like London based, or like, you know, other places in Europe. And so like just from that alone, I feel like I have kind of gained a lot of confidence, at least like digitally, like being able to manage that sort of stuff. And so even here now, like working from Slack and like, you know, Zooming and all the emails and stuff, I feel like that's what it really prepared me for more than anything, which these days is like the bulk of the work, it feels like a lot of the time. So I think for me, that's kind of like the biggest place. Yeah, biggest area.
Yeah, I guess it's the same for me. I feel like I was doing the corporate thing so long ago that whatever it is that I've learned is just sort of like integrated like already, and just subconsciously. But yeah, it is pretty much the same thing, where like you have to deal with like so many different types of people, and people also who like aren't designers too.
Right. Yeah.
And just navigating like how to communicate something design wise to someone through an email who doesn't know anything about
That's an
design.
interesting point. Yeah.
That is a talent.
Yeah, like a client or something, for example, or like.
Yeah.
I mean, even working with project managers sometimes, where you're like, if you're in the same space, it has felt to me super different from when I was working with a global team, and you kind of had to like do some lobbying to get even like internal people like on board with stuff. That sounds.
Yeah. I
Like,
also feel like it's kind of like working remotely via Zoom and like Slack. It really makes you think about time more, and like that everything is kind of bound by time, or it has a specific time slot. And I'm thinking like in my class, it's so challenging because we're going through 15 students of critique in a 3-hour time slot. And I think it just like, I think it's kind of opposite to like our natural flow of like dialogue and critique, where like it just in person, it feels more natural when you're talking to a client or a student. And then all of a sudden now it's like a 3-hour time becomes hyper like just becomes like hyper emphasized, that like you only have 3 hours, like each student gets 10 minutes, and you have to be really regimented with time. And I think the way that we're approaching our work and life is just, it's a totally different structure now. And I think especially for me in class, and I imagine with working with clients too, like setting up all these meetings, and there's just everything is more time oriented now than it felt like it was. And I think it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I guess that goes back a little bit to what I was saying about you students and the situation you're in, because it's like you're missing a lot of the cues and the body language and you know,
Yeah.
when something catches your eye, literally, like that's gone, you know what I mean? It's gone from crit. And I think that's the details, even like getting up close to something, like we're missing, you're
Totally.
missing quite a bit of
Totally.
things
The
that,
details and how much is lost in translation through that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's much less organic too. Like you don't
Mhm.
have those, you know, little impromptu conversations because only one person can talk at a time. You can't really be like doing any sort of side conversation or, yeah, like you said, just, you know, hey, what do you think of this? It has to turn into a whole email, and then if they're busy, you kind of really do have to be right next to them to get an immediate feedback, and that's challenging for sure.
Yeah. It's way less intuitive. Also, if you think about like that we don't have a commute now. So it's like, how do you really define when you're at work and you're not at work, or when you're at home and not at work? And like, I think that's like a really challenging thing to navigate, you know, like again, we're emphasizing time again, because if you're like, oh, it's 6 p.m., I shouldn't be working right now, you're like so conscious of that number. And I think that's like not very intuitive to like living life.
Well, I'm wondering from all of you, like, how are you creating space for like, or do you create space for like unstructured exploration? Because that's like both as a teacher and like as someone who has taken classes and as a studio leader, all of those things, it's like you kind of have to design that into your work. It's almost like you have to plan for it more so that it can feel more free. Which is weird, super weird. But I'm curious if you all are making time for that, you know, either to connect with friends in a more unstructured way virtually, or colleagues, or just for yourself.
I'm probably not doing it as much as I like want to, but when this all happened, I set up like a Zoom with all of our like old classmates, and it was like the first time all of us had seen each other. And I know Bijou did the same as well, and like a lot of people did too. And yeah, I think just trying to just plan things with people.
And just like enforcing the time, right? Like you said, Kristen, I feel like that's always like, for me at least, like what's on the chopping block, like my personal time. You know, that's the first thing to go. Self-care, all of this stuff, you know? It's so important though that to integrate that stuff so that it is part of your daily routine, I feel like. Which I also don't do very well. But I've been trying to, because of how overwhelmed I've been feeling, at least with the way that, yeah, like I'm navigating my space mentally and just physically, I've had to set some time aside just to be like, I'm gonna read just because, you know, like something I want to read, or, you know, do the like invisible work, like hiding things around the house, or like, you know, all those things that just, again, just fall to the wayside, I feel like.
Yeah, after I eat lunch, usually I'll do like a 15-minute chore session, just to like do something else that's not like eating and working.
Especially because, like, yeah, like what, you know, even what you were touching on about like having a commute and like, you know, having like having a journey to go somewhere to do something new or like something else. Like when we used to work from home without COVID, like it was so nice to do that because you were contrasting it, you know, with your everyday going into the office or having some sort of structure or system in place. So that contrast was really nice. Whereas now it feels like there's no system or structure. And so everything is just kind of like up in the air. So I think really just being super deliberate about being like, this time I set aside is for me. Whatever I want to do, I have to like do this because, you know, otherwise it won't get done.
Yeah, I think that personal time is like more important than ever. We'll probably open it up to the panel in a few minutes, and and maybe I know like a lot of the conversation is because it's hard to ignore like working from home because it's like a reality we're all facing. But if there's like more general like professional questions, Dave Chathis suggested like how like juggling multiple projects and what that looks like for all of you. But and if you, Teen and Angie, if you want to answer that, and then maybe from there we can kind of open it up to the larger public to ask questions, and maybe also check in to see if Emery or Owen have any last questions before we open it up.
What was the question?
From Dave Chathis, the question reads, how do you? Yeah. Okay. So how do you like juggle multiple projects, and how that kind of like how that would relate to a student, but also like as a professional designer, like juggling multiple things at once?
I wrote this in my answer on the Friday Fives, but I write lists all the time. It's like if every day I'll start with writing a list of all the tasks I need to do. Every week I'll write a list of all the like current projects that I have, and then sort of like from there break it down every day. Like I need to work on this second round of work today, or like I need to send an invoice to this person, specifically like about projects and stuff. Like I feel like without doing that, everything just sort of like floats around everywhere, and it's hard to like keep track of just like what things need to be done. And I feel like that also translates to like even if you're just working on like a school project, like breaking it down into like what needs to be done for that project, like in for class and stuff, just so you can like keep track of like the different things that you need to do for it.
Yeah, I think for me similarly, like I love lists. I also write them all the time. But I also feel like in order to write the list, I need to know like my intent for each project. Like some projects obviously are more like important or high priority than others, and so you always have to keep that in mind. But then sometimes there are projects that are maybe not as important and or pressing rather, but it's something you want to learn from, or maybe there's something specifically you want to develop with this project. So when that happens, I think it's more just like knowing the priorities of like, okay, what do I need to do and what do I want to do? And how can I spend my time being able to do both? Or maybe one is more important than the other. So just being like really clear mentally also about like how to perceive the project and where it sort of stands in terms of like if you're juggling a few, you know. But yeah, I would be curious to know how you guys are doing with your school projects and like all the assignments that you might have at once.
Owen, are you?
Oh, I'll go after you.
Okay. I feel like kind of just harkening back to that previous conversation about finding personal time. I've been really terrible at it. And so I've kind of been just finding the little things that I know that I can get done in a short period of time, and then kind of working those around the bigger chunks of time or that I have that I know that I can get done a more solid body of work. Is just kind of like what you're saying, is just finding that sort of natural hierarchy of both time and like pressing importance, and then also just sacrificing all of my personal time, it feels like right now. So that's an area that we need to work on, I think, generally. But
Yeah. At my last school, one of my teachers was really, I think he was like a big advocate for teaching us about like dealing with clients and, you know, what things are like in the real world, you know, that kind of thing. And so he would stagger projects maybe 1.5 weeks apart, like the start each one. So sometimes we'd be working on 3 things at a time. So that, I guess, kind of prepared me for like future work and future projects. And I think also like when I'm switching around projects, kind of working on things like multiple projects in a day, that helps me like keep interest and also just like my develop my ideas, because sometimes like part of a project will help you figure out part of something else. But also like now this semester, I have Bijan's class and a motion graphics class, which is usually more like kind of straightforward. And so I'll usually do some of my like third year design stuff and figure out like a foundation of where I want to go, and then do a motion graphics assignment just like in one go, and then like go back to the design stuff where it usually takes more like tinkering around with things. And I think just like splitting things up into stages really helps.
Totally. So important. Yeah. Like realizing everything's connected, and also like stepping away from your computer for 1 minute, or like watching TV. I always like tell like students and myself to make myself feel okay watching TV and movies, that like all that stuff comes back to your work, informs your work. It's all connected.
It definitely does.
Definitely. It does, right? Yeah. See,
Yeah.
It's not just me.
It's also like insight into like who we are as people right now. So
yeah, especially because like I think Kristen, like you were talking about this, like how like being inside now, like we're kind of like away from all the cultures that we've kind of like learned about, or maybe the ones we haven't learned about. Like watching movies and TV and listening to music and documentaries is more important than ever if we don't have like a connection to culture, and then we're designing for culture. I think we need to like refresh that kind of that inspiration some way.
It's a weird time where we could be just inventing some really imaginative stuff like out of nowhere. But if you have nothing to like get your energy going up like that, you kind of need to build it in, even if it's, I mean, not even if it's playing video games, like especially if it's, you know, some other kind of culture that's going to pollinate your work. I think I need to take my own advice on that for sure.
Same. Let's open it up to the larger public for questions now. There's one question from Emily. The question reads, what is a non-design related quarantine hobby or creative practice that has helped inform or improve your work life?
Animal Crossing. Oh yeah, we were heavy into Animal Crossing when it first popped off. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. Just having fun, yeah, with like life as if you can. If you have the time to, you know, like gaming is fun. I've been playing a lot of Mario Kart. I don't know if that necessarily informs my practice. And it allows me to work more, I guess, if I feel good.
Yeah, I think just finding creative things in like unexpected places is like the gist of like the Animal Crossing thing. Like that was the hobby in the first like 2 or 3 months, and like now I'm trying to like figure out like the next thing to like do for fun, but also like just keep my creative juices like flowing. Yeah, same. I think I've been trying to do that with every aspect. Like even if it's cooking, like if I do end up like, you know, making something like for dinner and stuff, I want to go in with the intent that I'm like gonna enjoy the process of cooking this, you know, not just to be like, I'm gonna feed myself. Like I want this to be an experience as well. And then also, again, like just been trying to read more and write more and be like, you know, reflective about things so that I remember, because again it all feels like one big day sometimes, so having those thoughts per day has been helpful for me, and then creatively, I think what else have a lot of watching TV. Lots of good shows out now. I feel like specifically with quarantine, like I feel like my new hobby is like to do nothing. Like there's nothing to do a lot of the times, and I feel like in our normal lives before, like we never really had the opportunity to be forced to just like sit at home and like not be able to do anything. And I have found out that I like really enjoy doing that is to just like not have to think about like anything, even if it is like a hobby. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next question from Susanna. Do you think designers should work to develop a distinct style or try to be as versatile as possible?
It depends on like what kind of designer you want to be. Like, I feel like there's really good examples of people who are like successful, who are both, you know, versatile, but also have a distinct style. It just depends on like the type of work that you like want to do. Like, do you want to be seen more like as an artist, and just create work towards that, or do you want to like be able to like have people reach out to you for like everything? Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, for me too, it's like, again, it goes back to sort of like what you want out of the job in a way. Like when I graduated, again, like my priority was like, I'm going to be in New York, not necessarily like I'm going to get a job that is like XYZ, you know, I want to be this type of designer. It was like, I'm going to go here and then figure out what kind of work I can do to facilitate like that life I want to live. And in that sense, like, I think I knew, knowing that like I would be like shifting or changing or having to be flexible, that it was better to be versatile and better to be good at like, you know, a few things all around, rather than just like put all my eggs in one basket and then like not really know if I could be flexible enough to go anywhere. But things are changing now too. Like you can work from anywhere, so it's not really as big of a deal. Like, because, you know, a client can reach out to you from any part of the world if you are really like stellar at something that, you know, is unique to you. So yeah, I think it really does come down to just like what type of designer, what type of life you want to lead with design. Yeah.
That's such a like prominent question that I feel like is something that like I'm trying to think about it now, like rationalize it. Like when I was in school, it was a huge kind of like looming question. And then I feel like it's just interesting thinking about it, like when you were in school and you had like zero professional perspective, and then outside of school, it's just a funny question because it pops up a lot, and I think it's something that a lot of students think about, and it's something I thought about. And like just reading the question again, do you think designers should work to develop a distinct style or try to be as versatile as possible? And I think like you could really interchange the word style with maybe medium, because I think now, like, you know, technology and new programs are becoming such a big part of like working professionally. I feel like there's a lot of designers who, for instance, like are really interested in face filters and technology and 3D and code. And like, I almost feel like maybe style is being like challenged by this new kind of category, which is like maybe technology. I mean, obviously, like, I guess you could say style is also technology, whether it's like someone doing hand-drawn stuff or like digital stuff. But I think it's like the question has changed a little bit, I think, with how prominent digital technology and those things are. Because I know a lot of designers personally who are just like hyped on learning the next program. And I think that's a totally different way to practice.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the most important thing, aside from anything, is just having a really strong POV. You know, like, what is your viewpoint on anything that you're doing, regardless of medium, you know, or the style? I think that's what really sets any designer apart from one another, and what sets designers and like people apart from just plugins.
Totally. And I think at the end of the day, really, that question is really like should be reflective of your personality, right? Like your POV, but also your personality. And like, are you the kind of person who wants to do the same thing over and over again, or keep developing this craft really in depth and really explore all the different parts of this specific thing? Or are you someone who like needs to be like to learn something new every project? Or yeah.
I also think it's okay to be both, or to want to do it.
That's like the best combination.
Yeah, totally. That's a good point.
Yeah, like,
if anyone's seen my portfolio, like the work all has like a very distinct style, but actually behind the scenes, like I take on so many random things, like retouching notes, like making a deck pretty, like, you know, just like things like that, where it's still fun and it's nice to be able to like do different types of work, but then also like I just very like I feel like just in terms of like presenting myself, like I like to come off like I have like a specific style, because that's like what I want to be hired for, but I actually do all these like other things.
Yeah.
Well, that's really what y'all are both saying is so interesting to me, because it really is more about your voice and like how you show up than it is like what something, I mean, of course it's also how it looks, but when you're describing it, it feels like it goes deeper than like an aesthetic. And whether that's medium or, you know, style or technique, I feel like everything you're saying goes into who you are as a person, what you bring to the table, how you work with other people, and your integrity, like for your own sense of craft, whatever that is.
Yeah, thank you for framing it like that so beautifully. That's exactly what I think I should
Yeah, I think I've been like struggling with not struggling, I shouldn't say struggling. I've been thinking about this a lot in a few different ways. It is a huge question, a broad question. The more and more it comes down to it, the stylistic presentation is kind of like not, if you really think about it, it's like not really for you. It's kind of like, it's the output that you like put into the world for like, whether it's the recruiter or the next job or the next project. But in reality, it's like, you know, Bijan, I could say that you have a distinct style based on like, if I were to go to your website, but I know that you can do just about anything because I've seen you do just about anything. And I would say that people come to me and say, I have a style. And I always say like, I don't really think I have a style. So I think it's more about the approach, really, like that's what I've been trying to build, is like, what is my approach to design? And that can be as versatile as it needs to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You think about the work is like more important almost than like the result of the work.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I've been like really hard, like.
Can you say it one more time,
doubling
Andrew?
down on it.
Oh God. Like how you approach the work is more important than the result of the work.
Totally. Yeah. Kendall, are you saying that like it's more so the other side of the kind of screen to be identifying like Angie has this style, Christine has this style? It's less of like Christine and Angie aren't like, I have this style. It's like the person on the outside saying that.
Right. Exactly. Like I would say like the way that if I get approached to do like an identity, like it's not really about like what the identity ends up looking like. It's like kind of how I start. It's like, am I going to look at it from a perspective of, you know, diving in on the specifics of a demographic or the specifics of a range of, you know, what the client wants versus like where they could sit in the category. It's like, that's really where my style is where I start the process that I like.
Yeah. I think that's also maybe the difference between like design and illustration a little bit. I don't want to make any illustrators mad, but it seems like design is like about the process and illustration is more about the style to some extent. I don't know, that's probably like a very, like Kristen, you probably have a better perspective on that, and it might be like irrational to say, but I think for me, like the way I teach design is like about the process.
Right.
Oh, you're muted, Kristen.
That's interesting. They can both be about like your voice, but how that shows up in your portfolio is super different. I keep going back to, I had somebody who said to me early in my career that design was like a service. It wasn't an art, making an artifact. And like artifacts are, you know, they're the thing that you can look back on and feel really proud of and think that it's super cool. It feels really tangible. And I love having those deliverables, especially as somebody who started in print. But yeah, the more I think about the people that I want around me and like how I want to spend my time in the studio, I think about what y'all are saying and like what I hear from students and like, how are you present? You know, what questions do you ask? It's really the whole communication. It really is a service in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I definitely also, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think that ultimately, like, I'm not saying that it's like easy to make something look good because it's not, but it, you know, there's a certain like level of talent that you can have just to be able to do that. But people want to work with people who are cool and like get you and you can be yourself around. And I'm sure that, like, you know, you guys are all freelancers. Like, I'm sure there are plenty of clients who come to you guys who are like, I, you know, love the way that you approach this work, or I love your style, and I love also like who you are, or like how you, you know, think about this stuff because you're a cool person. And ultimately, yeah, you just want to work around people who are good people.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of it. Let's go to the next question from Sasha. How do you stay creative in quarantine?
Yeah, I think again, just like setting the time for yourself to do something that you want.
Yeah, just separating the time to be creative versus the time to not, so that you're not like using all your time to be creative.
Right, or like and I try really hard to distinguish like being creative just for my job and like not exhausting myself energy wise and putting all of like my good eggs in just my job stuff, and then not having any energy later for like, yeah, my own stuff. So trying to have energy reserves.
Cool. And all right. Next question from Caleb. Who in the art world, design, photo, music, etc., is inspiring you at the moment?
I these days like try not to look at like references. I look more at just like what my peers are doing, like what Beach is doing, what Angie's doing. Like, I feel like there's just so much work out there right now that it's just like it gets like really overwhelming. Everything looks the same sometimes. So for me, like I connect more with like work that I see that like my friends are doing or that my colleagues are doing that I know, because it just I can connect with it in a way, like personally, and like talk to like them about like their process and like how they came to do this and be like, oh, this is like so cool. Like, how did you do this like texture on this thing? Yeah, so I think recently for me, I just have sort of stopped like following what people are doing in the world, and I'm just sort of like in my own bubble.
Yeah, I think for me too, I've been trying to stay away from like just looking at the normal places you would for design inspiration or like visual inspiration. And yeah, I think for me too, I get inspired more by like the music I'm listening to or the book that I'm reading. I definitely love words, like something about words and like the way that you put them together, you know, is so can be like, yeah, just like makes me feel something, and so then I get inspired by that. I also really love artists like musicians who are doing stuff like that aren't just music, you know, like I feel like musicians are like unique in that they get to do so many different things as like creatives, and that and they're not just stuck in their like music lane, you know, or like for example, like Bad Bunny, like just had this concert that he did public for like all of New York, and like I don't know, stuff like that is really inspiring to me, like to think outside of the box or like what normal would be and stuff. And artists like that are, yeah, like who I like to pay attention to.
Totally. Cool. Thank you. All right, next question from Jason. Do you know what kind of designer you are? If so, what were defining moments so far? It's a good question.
What type of designer?
I don't think I would define myself as like a specific type of designer. I'm just me. And in terms of like defining moments, like I don't know. I feel like for me, it's like when I started freelancing, I sort of just like found the thing that I like really liked doing, which I like didn't really realize was gonna happen. Like the freelance thing just sort of like happened accidentally. And ever since then, I've just sort of like felt like everything that I've done, it just like makes sense.
I mean, that's kind of a kind of designer, freelance, right? I mean,
I guess freelance.
I mean, right? Like, I think really more so like we're talking about design as this process, practice oriented thing. Like maybe it's less about the kind of work you make and it's more about, the way you make work, you know?
Yeah. If you're freelancing, you're dealing with clients. Like, you know, if you're full time, you're staffed and you're kind of working with one brand, one kind of thing.
If you don't like talking to people, if you don't like budgeting or like sending invoices, you're probably not going to be a freelancer, right?
Yeah.
I guess on that end, I'm the full-time designer.
But at an agency, so it's different.
Yeah, it's different. It is different. It's not like one client, several at a time. I think the defining moments have been in parallel. Like I can't, detach like my personal life or my design life. So it would be every time that I've moved. Has been a defining moment, just huge growth spurts and huge like lessons and having to adapt. And again, those are not necessarily design skills. They're just, like skills you have to learn in life. And so I think those have always helped me become a better designer. So any move I've made, so New York and then Amsterdam, now to here, I would say are my big defining moments.
Cool. Okay. Next question. Do you have advice? This is from Sasha. Do you have advice for people who can't make design projects for fun because they associate it so much with work?
I would say like do something that you want to do, but that's not design. Like just things that you're again like really into on a personal level. Whether that's like maybe embroidering or something. Like I got really into embroidering when I first moved to New York. And then I found that like doing that, I was like paying more attention to typography, because it's like sewing in each letter and having to do that. And then like other creative outlets, I guess, just like I also am a big fan of like trying to refurbish like my old clothes into something that I might wear again. And so, things like that are really fun for me. And then I think it gives me the energy to like work on other design stuff that maybe I hadn't thought about. Like, oh, now I can have like this cool graphic on this like sweater I'm trying to redo or something. And then it comes into play like that. Or like, I'm trying to cook something new and then maybe it's something I really enjoy and then I want to make a zine out of it afterwards,
Yeah. I feel like my initial thought when I heard the question was just don't do it. Don't do it until you're like ready to do it. Because if you like force yourself, then it's just not going to be fun.
That's so true.
And like just doing other things and like what Angie says, like maybe something will just come naturally to you, like as you're not thinking about it. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Okay. We have a question from Anonymous. What was your biggest fear while you were in school about becoming a designer that was debunked when you actually got immersed in the working design world? I can read it again if you want to.
Other stuff actually.
I feel like me personally, like my experience at school, like I was just the type of designer that focused more like on style and on visual things versus like concept and like stories and like coming up with like a deep
idea behind things, and I was like so scared that people were going to see right through me and like think that I was just like shallow. But like once I entered like the working world, I realized like people don't think about things like as deeply as I thought they do actually. And like a lot of the times, like when you see work that has like a deeper meaning behind it, like I feel like that comes a lot from just the designer like wanting to like add that into it. Like just from my work experience, like when I get briefed on a project, a lot of the times, like especially in like a Nike context, like they're like, we just want this to look fast, or we just want this to look fun, or like Gen Z. Like it's never anything like deeper than things
Yeah.
like that. And I mean, that might just be like what I've experienced. Like I feel like, you know, you guys have all probably experienced different type of work, but for me, that was one of the biggest realizations after graduating from school.
I think for me, it's just like a general statement of like people are at any level are always like a work in progress. Like you think that, you know, when you graduate school that a senior title or like a manager title means that you have your shit together or that you're going to know how to lead a team and stuff, or like that they're like the, you know, they got all the answers. But, you know, everyone's like, what I've realized is that everyone's still just like working it out and like figuring it out as they go, you know, no matter how senior or managerial you get. So that was really nice when I got to the workplace and just being like, oh yeah, everyone's like figuring it out.
Yeah, that's so reassuring, like all the time. Like I remember I like worked with one of my teachers who was like one of my favorite designers, and like you just when you just see someone's output like from Instagram or from the internet, you're just like, wow, like they're making all this work and they seem like they have a great life. And then like I worked with them, and the first week I realized that he works till like 3 or 4 a.m. every night, and that he doesn't make much money, and that he has like, it's just like hard.
Yeah.
It's just like, you don't think about those things, you know? So
Yeah.
everyone is figuring it out. And I think it's like super relieving to hear that, or to see like people that you look up to realize that they're struggling.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Nobody has it just like all figured out, you know?
All right, next question from Edwin. What is one skill that you've developed having professional experience that you didn't expect to obtain going into the field?
Writing emails.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Practical stuff.
Yes, a lot of practical stuff, but I used to like hate writing things and also like just talking to people. And I've just learned that just being good at writing emails is like super important actually. Trying to just get your ideas across and like just communicating with people in general.
Go on, please.
Go ahead.
You-
I was just gonna throw in like doing my taxes really well.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh,
I still don't know if I'm doing them correctly or not.
shoot. I didn't get on that.
That's
Like,
yeah, things you would never think about, right?
Yeah. Organizing my files.
Oh yeah, organization stuff. I think also this is a little bit unrelated, but something I realized in the workplace is like, at least in school, I had this like fixation on making work all the time that was super original or like unique, and everything that had to be like something new, and now I'm just focused on like I just want to make work that lasts, or like is cool beyond just a year, or like it doesn't have to be the most original, you just have to be like smart and like thoughtful about it, and that can be enough. And it doesn't have to be this like overly drawn out process to create something like crazy unique. Something that I've like developed and kind of been training myself throughout the years after school, because I just in school that's like part of it. I don't know.
Definitely. All right, next question from Tavin. Where do you find music?
I'm gonna be real, like a lot of times my boyfriend just has always playing like playlists and is like curating stuff. Like he is heavy into music, so yeah, he hears a lot of stuff like through Twitter probably, like for releases, and like Spotify. YouTube is like a big place that we like to just like click around and like, you know, find new things that we wouldn't have normally found. I don't know, what about you? Where do you find music?
I mean, usually just Spotify. I'll just click the playlist that they just make for me and then just listen to that.
The algorithm.
Yeah, the algorithm, exactly. Yeah.
All right, we're getting close to 8. We have a few more questions. Might not be able to get through all of them, but we can answer a few more. So maybe no more new questions. This one is from Anonymous again. Angie, what was your experience like moving to New York? Did you have a job set up when you moved? Any advice for someone wanting to relocate after finishing their undergrad?
Oh yeah, my move to NYC. Did I have a job when I set up when I moved? I did. And so in our senior year, you know, the whole like, oh, I gotta like tap into my network and reach out to everyone before I graduate, like, you know, frenzy starts to happen. And so I was kind of in one of those. And then the place that I worked at, Brand New School, was actually like founded by someone who went to CalArts as well. And so knowing that, you know, I was like, okay, great, like maybe I can, you know, try to use that to my advantage, because why not, you know? And so that's definitely something that I would never, like, you know, I would stress more than anything is like always tap into like your network and the people that you know, and never be like afraid or ashamed to ask for that stuff, you know, because you don't know until you try, or unless you put it out there. And so advice for someone who wants to relocate after finishing, again, for me, like my main goal was I'm going to be in New York. I think even if I hadn't had the job set up, I would have made my way there and then tried to find something anyway. And I've had a friend who did that too, actually. And she managed to, yeah, find a job after moving there. And so, you know, it doesn't, I don't think one or the other is like the right way, you know? It's just a mixture of like luck and timing and, you know, all those other factors.
Cool. Thanks, Angie. All right, next question from Erica. How do you keep your design process intact when working with corporate clients? Do you ever turn down work because it doesn't align with your process? Good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
I always just go into projects specifically with the goal of making something that I would want to show in my portfolio, no matter what it is. Like, even if it's something boring, I try to make it into something fun for myself. So I actually like don't ever say no to anything, because I just see everything as an opportunity to like make into something for myself.
That's awesome.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Badass, Dean. That kind of goes to the next question, which is kind of related, but how do you make a project this is from Kiola, how do you make a project you are uninterested in interesting for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. Like, I'll come up with ways just to make it more fun. Like, can I use a fun typeface for this serious thing? If somebody's asking me to like put together a deck, I'll just try and sneak in like little ways to make it more fun and just hope that nobody like really notices. And actually most of the time people don't. But yeah.
How about from a student perspective? Like if like for a student project?
For
Same
me,
thing or?
Same thing?
I mean,
okay. Well, I was just gonna say sometimes for me, I just like reframe the question or like the brief sometimes, because maybe the brief in itself is worded so boring that I'm like, you know, so sometimes it's just like switching out the wording for the actual question, like the project. But then other times, like Tina is saying, like making it fun for yourself. At brand new school, for example, I often made work that was very exploratory and expressive, and that was sort of like, I knew that my work wouldn't get like produced per se, but it was like I still had a function within the team because it showed the range of like the styles that a client could go in, you know, because you always want to
Mhm.
show like the simple stuff to the complicated stuff, and my work always tended to go on the complicated end, and so I kind of knew that and would play into it and just be like, I'm gonna go wild with it because I know that, you know, at this point on the spectrum, like may not even be like a real option, so just gonna have fun with it. But of course, having a balance, because you don't want to just show like crazy stuff, only crazy stuff to like a client. You'd want to show good balance and range.
That's such a good point, though. I think that the same question has come up in past lectures about like either corporate work or working in-house. And sometimes I feel like if you can have someone on the team who's doing that, you get to do really much more progressive work, even if it's not the one that you proposed, just because it opens people's minds and maybe people are more willing to talk to you about possibilities too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's not that, it's at least then the client's like, oh, I know it's not this. And then it helps them even come to a more clear answer, you know? So yeah, for sure.
I think the most important thing is like showing that you care and through your work. And I think like if you just do something in response and just like do it really fast or inconsiderate to like the client or the content, I think that's not great. But I think like I think it's always okay to challenge the brief and challenge the work at hand as long as you're showing that you care for it. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Well, saying like you did to reframe the brief, I think that's great advice for students because ultimately it's your portfolios that you're going to have to put out there. Like you shouldn't be designing for, well, I think you shouldn't be designing for your professors. I was about to be like, who am I to say, but why not?
That's true.
You kind of, it's up to you to like invest in it. And like Bijan's saying too, if it's obvious that you care about it and you're engaging with it, like own it, you know?
Yeah, and I think also if you think that the project could be better by you tweaking it, then I think the professor should allow that. And I think again, I think that should be a part of the process to kind of be looking at not only the student but also the professor and challenging both sides to it and encouraging students to challenge that is like super important.
Well, eventually I would hope it's something like Angie is talking about. It comes into your life beyond school. And Angie, I'm not sure if that's something you learned before you were out there in the world or if it's something that you grew into, but
definitely the latter.
Well, it's good if you can start growing into it sooner. Maybe we can actually change our creative cultures a little bit to be more far-ranging.
That also goes into like the earlier questions about style. Really is like developing your point of view is like, this is now the time to sort of do that. If you can look at a problem that's being presented to you or a brief and say, well, I have a different point of view, and then you'll start to continue and further and then eventually land somewhere. Well, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay, maybe last question from Joe, and then we'll wrap it up after. I know it's getting late, especially for you, Kendall. How do you approach projects with a team? As a designer, at times it feels much easier to do all the work yourself, but would love to know your approach in working as a team with different designers.
I think just being open to what the other people have to offer, and also just having like a good attitude about everything, especially when working with other people. Yeah, like I've been in situations where I feel like, yeah, like I'd rather just do it all by myself, but what's the point of like working on a team then? Like you're there to learn from other people and to like hear what they have to say about things. Like I feel like there are ways to like learn from people in different ways, just in general. So yeah, just trusting the other people to do a good job.
Yeah, trust is a huge part of it. And I think when you're working on a team, you want to know kind of like strengths and weaknesses of like your teammates, so that if you are splitting work, you know, it's important to have like a good flow and like know who would be best at what in terms of like time efficiency, you know. And then it is really it's easier to do it yourself for sure, but that's where like the communication skills really have to kick in, you know, because you have to be very explicit with how you know, need to divvy up the work and come to like a singular goal, you know, with the work, even though many people are working on it. So just having like all those parameters like really clear so that everyone knows what they're working towards is really important, I feel like. And just again, like having a really good relationship with your teammates so that you can be candid about things when things are, you know, pop up, or maybe miscommunication happens and you don't want someone to feel like they can't come to you and ask you for clarification or something. So yeah, just like having a good dynamic and relationship, as well as like being really clear as a team on like making sure you're all on the same page.
Cool. All right. I think that's a wrap. Want to thank everyone at PNCA, Emery and Owen for all the research and posters and questions, and Kristen and Chelsea for the support in this panel series. For Kendall for being gracious enough to donate your time and be on this panel with us second time in a row from New York. And of course, to Christine and Angie for sharing your stories and answering questions from all of us. And yeah, thank you everyone who attended as well. Yeah, have a great night.
Thank you.
We love you.
So much. It was such a great experience.
Thank you.
See you guys. Good to
Bye.
talk.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.